Welcome to Startup Different. I'm Dave, your Chief Podcast Officer. With me is my brother and podcast sidekick, Chris. We're two successful entrepreneurs paying it forward by debunking startup myths, tackling the toughest challenges, and giving you the tools to build your business. Today, we're going to be talking about office space and what it means to your startup and its culture. Let's get into it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Startup Different, episode dos. Very, very exciting episode today, focusing on office space and why it matters for your startup and all that good kind of jazz. But before that, Chris, how you doing? It's good to see you. Really?
I had an excellent weekend of windsurfing. It was a blast.
Windsurfing?
Yeah, it was great. It's getting
Did you take
cooler,
the new sail out or what?
I did. It was wonderful. Fantastic times.
It's a black sail. Achilles.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you? What'd you do?
You gotta feel pretty badass out there on a black sail. I know I went apple picking, and my little one was incredibly excited about this. I was like a little bit less motivated, although we did actually go on this like huge slide that they had there. Okay, for this place, it's just outside the GTA, and it's like a humongous place. People in Toronto know it, but it's more of a theme park, I feel like, at this stage than it is actually like an apple orchard. But hey, it was a great time, and the apples
got to
delicious.
monetize whatever you can.
Dude, there was like a rock concert coming on after, and there was like a cover, like an old like cover Eagles band, and there were a lot of more elderly individuals lining up for that.
Sounds like
they were
a lot of
everyone in the cafeteria area, please finish your food and get the hell out of here. This is a concert venue.
Sounds like that business has pivoted many times, which we'll discuss on future episodes.
I was sitting there eating my giant, and I mean enormous corn on the cob. And I was like, man, these guys are profitable. Like, wow, this is profitable. Anyway, I mean, I feel like apples are more or less worthless. Like, you know what I mean? Like on a marginal cost level, like it's got to be pretty darn profitable. But
I don't know about that. It looks like a ton of work. You gotta
but like you gotta see this place though. It's like the wonderland of apples. So it's kind of it was funny, but
cool.
I digress. That was a different kind of space. Today we're going to be talking about office space and how it's important for your startup business. And this was really like a journey for Chris and I, and something that we wanted to bring up early in the podcast because we thought this is actually pretty important. And so much of this, and this is going to be, again, like so many themes of the show and that kind of go hand in hand with themes of entrepreneurship. But, this like, sort of piece of like credibility and legitimacy, something that you always worry about. And office space is one of those things like headcount or some of those other, like, I don't know, how much funding did you get? Like those kinds of things that kind of like associate with like credibility in other people's eyes. And we just felt like it was something sort of important to address. But so we want to go through our story, what that looked like, and kind of the pros and cons, that kind of stuff. But I guess I want to start off like with just like a high level question. I just want to throw out there, and I kind of mentioned some of it here. But why does office space matter? What does that actually? Is that actually important? Like Chris, what's your like hot take?
The first thing that comes to mind when I think of it is like, when an employee is thinking about working for you, they want to come and interview in person and they want to see that you're really well put together, that you're, legit. Right. And if they walk in and you don't have a good office space or it's really shabby looking, it's tough to get good people to work for you, even though like it's post pandemic and everybody works from home at least some portion of their time. Still having that physical presence is like the nucleus of your business. You need some of that to actually happen to get good people.
I remember reading about those like Solo Stove guys who are actually also from Ontario, which is pretty fun. And they're like interviewing people, being like, they're in like a Starbucks interviewing people, being like, yeah, don't worry, like we'll have an office though. Like it's a tougher sell when you're trying to be like, oh, at this company, we're all about, X, Y, or Z. And you're like, and then they call out your name for your order. You know what I mean? Like it's a bit of a tough one. So I think, a lot of this is definitely on the sort of level of credibility, but there's also sort of another level too, that it's the establishment of your culture. I mean, the physical space that you're in is a huge part of your culture at a company. And it's something that you can pretty easily overlook as founders. Cause I always like to say too, like Chris, we would work in a cave
Anywhere.
as long as it had Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? Like we didn't really matter to us. But obviously, for somebody coming into work, you want to have a really, really nice, setup, or like something that at least makes you feel something.
I feel like your employees too, Dave, like when they tell their family they got a job at your company, like one of the very first questions they're going to get asked is, where's their office? Like,
yeah, where are you going?
Yeah, where are you going? And if you answer, well, I met them at a Starbucks and now they're telling me they're going to get an office, but we don't have it yet. But that's not going to go over well. Like right out of the gates, the family of your employee is rooting against you. So
yeah, well, that's interesting. Better start looking for a new job. You can have this one temporarily till you figure it out. And the other thing they flip
just
side
do this
of that,
for now.
Yeah, just for now. I mean, the flip side of that for founders, right, is like it's hard to it's not an easy, and it's not frankly a fun process to hire people. It's really hard. And so like making sure that you can retain people easily is a big deal. So yeah, that's a really important point. And I guess like sort of dovetailing on that too is like it. And so we talked, culture, we've got like, retention. There's also though something about like innovation and creativity and that kind of piece. And if you don't have an office that kind of gives those vibes, like your office is really going to set the tempo for how your business operates, all the way down from all the way up from how you innovate, all the way down to like probably even how you treat your customers. So it's something to it's actually kind of this like subtle thing, or maybe not so subtle sometimes, that affects your entire organization.
With that, Dave, why don't we tell them about our Office Space journey from about 2014 till about 2019, I think is kind of like the right time span.
Yeah, it's a gooder. And I think I think it's probably pretty consistent with a decent amount of startups, but there's a couple of twists and turns in there. Well, Chris, why don't you get us going, man?
Okay, cool. So we started working together like in an office in 2014 when I moved to Toronto. Dave was already in Toronto, and we found Office Space at the Toronto Business Development Center, which it was actually a really cool building because everybody knew it. Right at the bottom of one of the main streets called Yonge Street in Toronto, and it had it was actually had a big sign for the big newspaper in town called the Toronto Star, and it was like this bright blue sign, so people saw it. It was so blue it would burn your eyes.
To the people of Toronto Star, turn that thing down, man.
Yeah,
you can't even read it. It's so bright.
So Dave and I were in there, and it was probably 100 square feet, maybe. So we were pretty packed in tight. And then we brought in a student intern that was working with us, and there was 3 of us, and it was definitely tight at that point. But we liked it because, we were around other startup companies. We were doing good things. There were other companies doing good things. The vibe wasn't the greatest. Like, it was okay. It was office space, and there were other startups around, but there wasn't really any like culture there. But our more immediate problem was that we just didn't have enough space. We needed more space.
Well, I think like the first thing that I would say, there's 2 more important things that I also want to mention here. Going to this office space was part of our like all in moment, like when you jump from like your side hustle to doing this full time. That was what I did. Like I quit my job at a major telecom, and Chris sold his life in Kingston and came, and we did this in Toronto. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you as a founder, at least for us, we were swelling with like pride and happiness. Like, this was awesome. We had a physical space. This is so cool. And you don't realize that it's kind of a piece of crap, but because you're just so pumped, you're just so happy that you have that shred of credibility, even for you in your interactions with like your friends, your family, whatever, you'd be like, yeah, we're going to the office. We have.
Yeah, I remember actually your then girlfriend, now wife, came to visit us once and like had to check in at reception because there was like a reception desk for the entire floor. And then they came and got us, and we like brought your girlfriend and her friend to see our office space, and like it was tiny and everything like that, but it was like, oh, they actually have like an office in like an office tower, so it was kind of cool.
But the segue to that, I think, is what are your expectations for startup office space? And this is a real challenge for entrepreneurs as well. So the expectation is like, where's the slide, where's the foosball table, where's the keg of beer? And this was very much like here's 1980s, yellow, gray walls, but
I love the green carpet. We had the green carpet was awesome.
One of my favorite Instagram accounts is this guy who goes around and just takes photos of carpets in hotels. and like the weird patterns and stuff. I don't know why I'm into it, but it's interesting. And I feel like he would have enjoyed this particular floor of the Toronto Star building. But anyway, so competing though with that expectation of what a startup is supposed to be is also a challenge, because that's what those employees are going to expect too. So Chris was kind of getting into this, but like it was kind of a problem. Like it was great on the one hand, we had the space, but on the other hand, it was just like totally culture dead. Like it was just like it was also like, for what it's worth, it was like a cemetery of like former Toronto Star greatness, you know, when they had many floors of this building, and this was just like basically an abandoned floor that they had, that
they kept the green carpet though.
Yeah, kept the business incubator came in and like renovated. So there's something to be said here that like it, you know, it wasn't exactly the cheeriest place, and so it actually caused some problems. You know, we had, for our first couple, so you know, our intern went back to school and then eventually got a job somewhere else, which was cool. We actually tried to hook them up with that because that's what they wanted. And then we had, you know, a few other employees, and you know, eventually one of them left because I think they couldn't really see the direction, and also it wasn't a great vibe. The other one wasn't working out, and we had kind of this weird culture failure that we're going to talk about on another episode. But basically, we got in this position where we're like, you know, damn, we need to figure this out. We need to reset. And we did. We actually reset our culture, and we knew that that also involved a new office space. And with that, we went to like one of my favorite places in the world, which is Bright Lane. And I don't know, Chris, you want to take us through Bright Lane?
Yeah, so Bright Lane was like kind of in the cool part of town. King West in Toronto is where all the nightclubs are, things like that. All the bars and nightclubs are there. Great restaurants. You could spend all your money at amazing restaurants around us. So it was an expensive spot. The building we were in was like a button factory for military uniforms from World War II. I think it was like Sterling.
Does anyone have
buttons or something like that? Yeah. But it had been renovated. And so it was all like exposed brick and wood beams and really hip. And then there were lots of bright colors. They had really like dressed it up, made it look awesome.
Yep.
So the space itself actually looked really cool. But what they did was they did a whole bunch of other things that made it really hip and a cool place to be. Dave, take it away, because this is some of your favorite stuff.
Like, just to like really give you an idea of the impact of this place. Like a couple days ago, I was at a little get together here in the neighborhood. There was a person there. We couldn't really place each other. Like we didn't really know each other, but we like kind of knew the faces. And we kind of kept going back and forth. Do I know you from this? Do I know you from that? We're like, no. And then eventually it's like, wait a minute, were you in Bright Lane? And they were like, yeah. And it was because they were also part of a startup in Bright Lane. And we started reminiscing. And it was this awesome thing because the culture created by the people of Bright Lane was so spectacular and so much fun. You know, it showed us like, so for on the one hand, it was like, this is like, work can be fun. Work isn't like, you know, your dad's office that's cubicles and, you know, kind of that spirit crushing sort of thing. You know, it can be big open spaces, your exposed wood, your exposed brick, your beer, you know, fun social hours on the Fridays. You know, there's kind of like a fun, you can kind of go around and talk to the other companies. You know, they're all kind of trying to do their thing. Everybody's just trying to make it. There's this spirit of like, we can do this, even if we're not part of the same company, which was really, really cool. So that was important. And this was also another part of the problem in our first office spaces. There just weren't that many people there. You know what I mean? And it was a really different vibe. Whereas here, there weren't that many like rooms that closed. There's actually kind of an issue. Like I'm very loud. Sorry about that. But you know, I'd be on calls and like I needed a door. I needed a door to close. Unfortunately, Chris shared an office with me back then.
Except I was in there with you on all those demos.
You were in the octagon with me, the sound octagon. And I think like, but it was really neat for our staff because as we added people and, you know, they could go around, they could talk to the other companies. It could feel like you were part of something and part of a bigger movement that wasn't just like, you weren't just your company, you were part of like entrepreneurship, you know, it's the spirit of it. And it was also cool too, because it really elevated our culture game. Like all of a sudden we went from kind of being like, we don't know how to do this to, oh, they can, I don't want to say outsourcing because like we were in the building, but like, you know, we were kind of outsourcing it to Bright Lane because they just knew how to put on good community events and, you know, create that sense of community.
Beer keg helps.
Yeah, beer keg every Friday, no problem with that. I mean, some of those beer clocks are pretty sweet. But it was, and you know what though, it also fit more into though the stereotypical startup vibe, and like we just wouldn't have had the financial capability back then when we first got in there to be able to do any of that stuff.
I remember we interviewed prospective staff on the rooftop patio, and it was
Mhm.
awesome because we would be walking them through. This was like a building that had hundreds of employees walking around from different companies. There was like
Mhm.
a shared kitchen. There was amazing coffee machines, things like that. They would give like I forget, it was like Tuesday mornings. They would have a morning like breakfast snack for
Oh
everybody, and then like
yeah, that's
Thursday
right.
afternoons they had like an afternoon snack. And like our staff, we would be working. Dave and I would be working because we weren't really into that stuff, but our staff were really into those perks.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like on Thursday afternoon, all of our staff would get up and leave,
At the same
and we'd
time,
be
just
we'd be
everybody.
looking at each other like, where are they going? They're like, oh, there's ice cream sandwiches today. Everybody wants one. So we're like, oh my gosh, let's go.
Yeah.
So it was great. We kind of outsourced a lot of the company culture stuff to the co-working location. And my favorite piece of it, though, just being pragmatic for a little while, it was like the cloud computing scale out equivalent of office space. So as we added staff, we could just add another desk. We could go up to
Right.
the management office of
Yeah.
Brightlane and say, hey, we just hired a new person. And they'd say, no problem. The extra, I think it was $500 a month or something like that. You get a new dedicated desk. And there was space around where we were kind of located in the office. So worked out great. We could just kind of tack on more desks as we grew the company. And the more people we got, the better the culture got. And it was fantastic
Yeah. I
until
think
it wasn't.
until it
Da,
wasn't.
da,
So I
da.
guess the pros and cons though, just of that scaling up piece, is that it does get more expensive like reasonably quickly. Like you kind of have like a logical limit as to how long you could be in a co-working space anyway. Like that before it becomes like a little bit impractical financially. Like at a certain point, you're gonna start looking around, and that's kind of what happened to us. Um, so like, but a couple of externalities here too. So Brightlane eventually gets purchased by another firm. That firm comes in and says, "We're not going to change anything." They change everything. Okay, like how do you know someone's going to change everything? Don't worry, nothing's gonna change. I don't know why they're Richard Nixon as well, but but they, whatever. It is what it is. It's business. Things happen. So they came in, they got bought. The culture really changed at Brightlane. Got exponentially more expensive
Yeah, they
suddenly.
really jacked the rent. Yeah.
And Chris and I had already been kind of kicking around by this point in our business. We've been doing really well. We were very profitable. We had like no liabilities at this point because we bootstrapped our business. And we're just sort of like, okay, well, maybe we can find office space. So we were looking around Toronto, and there's kind of this concept of like an office condo, and particularly for like new buildings, for new office buildings, where you buy it out and you build it yourself. You buy a shell, you make a big concrete slab, in a building, and it's like a condo in any other in any other major tower. You have a lot of control over basically what it's going to look like, and there's also amenities that you would have. So, like a nice boardroom as opposed to a pool, or like
Yeah.
a nice patio for corporate events and stuff like that, as opposed to like a gym or something. So it did actually. So we got pretty serious about this, and we actually found something we liked down on the Toronto waterfront. And then Chris I don't know if I like appointed you or if I imagined I have that kind of authority, but you then quickly became the chief office design officer.
Yeah.
The
Well, like
CODO, Kodo.
we hired a really good company to help us build it out, pick the furniture, manage the contractors and all that sort of stuff. And really our philosophy was we were coming from that Brightlane place that we loved, and the kitchen was the amazing spot in there. So we basically said to the design team, we said, we basically want a Starbucks with an office behind it. So our office was kind of configured as you'd walk into it, and it was like walking into a Starbucks. So it was like kitchen with awesome coffee maker, the kegerator, fridge, all that sort of stuff, a big bar top where people can hang out, a big TV, you can put the news on, that sort of stuff. So we really duplicated what Brightlane was doing there in our own space. And then the office space area of it, we really tried to focus on like what's going to make the staff like comfortable and productive. So we got like sit stand desks that were like power that went up and down, and we got really nice chairs that were really, really comfortable with like headrests.
Yeah,
And all that
you're
sort
selling
of
yourself
stuff.
short though, man. That equipment that we had for staff was unbelievable. Everybody had those like wide monitors. Chris is like kind of like pretty intense on cable management, and so it was like one cable from the monitor would plug into your laptop, and then like everything on the desk would like be active. Like you use your keyboard, there's a mouse, there's the monitor, there's like you're into the Wi-Fi, the computer's being powered. Like everything was happening with one plug. It was like the ultimate IT install.
Yeah. So for all the nerds out there, it's the monitors were like smart monitors that had USB hubs in them. So all of our staff were running MacBook Pros with USB-C connections. So they would literally just walk in, grab the one cable, the USB-C cable, plug it in. That supplied power, all the peripherals, everything to the workstation. And then they would go home and they would just unplug the one cable, chuck their laptop in their bag, and off they went. So it was a really good setup.
And I think, and you did a lot of other cool stuff too, like we did like an RFP and everything too, to design the interior, and it was an amazing job. Some really awesome, like it's an awesome looking office. We even were like featured on the website for like the design company, because I think they were really excited about how the end product looked. And it wasn't like a massive office space. It wasn't like as if we were like Shopify or something and we had like a whole floor. It was just like we had our own office, but it was pretty good. You could fit about like 30 odd people in there. And but it was really this like physical manifestation of the culture. Like our culture evolved from like nothing, like every company, to okay, this is kind of fun, to this is really fun and exciting, and we believe in what we're doing, and there's enough people, to okay, now we're big enough to graduate from this, and we're going to do our own thing, and we're going to have our own office. We're going to make it look however we want. We're going to get our own big sign with a big logo, put that on the doorway. Like that was I think that was very satisfying. And I think for the staff, I remember, because we were kind of in this like weird tweener zone for a bit, where we were kind of like moving from like Brightlane and what had been purchased as Brightlane, and then to the new one. And I remember the day when the staff, like we opened the door and we all walked in together, and it was just like this holy F moment. Like this is fantastic. Like it's head and shoulders better than what we had, and it was our own, and it really felt like something that we could be proud of. So
it was our clubhouse, And the other aspect, though, too, Dave, was on the flip side of it is the financial aspect to it. So when you think about a lot of people, they rent and then they get enough for a down payment, and then they buy a home and move to it. And we sort of did the same thing with our office space. We were paying a fortune, especially to the new company that bought Brightlane. And so we started doing the math on this and being like, okay, like we're paying like a ton in rent. What can we buy with that? So we went and we got a commercial mortgage. We actually set up, Dave and I owned our company 50-50. So we set up another company, a holding company, and we split that 50-50 as well to get the commercial mortgage. So essentially, like our operating company, our software company, was the renter, and our holding company was the landlord. And essentially the operating company was paying off the mortgage to the holding company, and then we ended up owning it at the end of it. So it was a great setup.
Right? Renter of the year, exactly. 5 years running, paying those bills on time. So
I can't say that we invented it. I think we picked up this idea from our dad, who had a photocopier dealership and did kind of the same thing. So as we had grown up, we had heard about some of these things. So it was in the back of our minds, but it worked out really well.
I think it's worth saying too, like it is definitely a good path to wealth, but it is also like an expensive path. Like, and you suddenly, like for us, we weren't used to having any debt. So all of a sudden we had some debt, and that was kind of interesting. We weren't worried about it. Our cash flows were insanely positive. I mean, we were doing double-digit growth every single year, so it didn't really matter. Now, the biggest thing that got weird here was like 2019. And then at the end of 2019, start of 2020, there was this thing that happened. It was kind of a small thing, some niche issue that affected, a couple of markets. Pandemic, bam, and we're all working from home, right? And so I think that was a tough one. And so on the one hand, we were like really excited about the office, and we loved it, and Chris and I would go in every day, and our culture was about being in the office. We didn't even have a remote working policy; like there was no option. And then it was like, okay, we have to do this, and it changed the vibe a little bit, and that was a little disappointing. But that's the reality, that kind of stuff can happen. Like it was kind of like a market disruption, not like a competitive disruption. But it was, one of those things where we never would really go back to the office in the same way again. We'd always have some people, but, we respect that, things changed. And I still think though that the office was and remains essentially important to any business.
Yeah. Now that we've sold our
Yeah.
business, the new owners have renewed the lease.
Yeah,
Like
Motorola Solutions still rocking it in there in downtown Toronto.
yeah. And, I think they recognize that even if it's only used, once or twice a week by the majority of the staff, it's still an important piece that people can go to a central place and hang out and have those meetings and see people face to face.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter what team you had. Like if you had the sales team or the operations team or your customer success or your implementations or your developers. I think the reality is the efficiency of the in-person meeting. And really, I know like some of you are just shuddering now because you're probably part of some like in-person meetings that go on for like 3.5 hours and you've got like 25 people in it, nothing gets done. This is not that kind of meeting. This is like a working meeting. You've got a big TV at the other end of the room or you got a whiteboard and you're working on it and you actually figure stuff out and you action that stuff immediately. The office was great for that. It's just so difficult to replicate that on Zoom. It can feel a lot less real. We had other things that we did in our culture, like morning stand-ups and stuff like that. And the effect in person versus the effect online is just fundamentally different. So Chris and I are big believers in the office space. Worked out so well for us. I think it's the key to a lot of success. I think it gave us a material competitive advantage in the market, helped build our culture. And was actually something that's super duper important. If you're thinking about office space too, it's just one of those things that it's just such a credibility piece, a legitimacy piece. And, I think, again, startup founders are always insecure. It was just really one of those nice things where, no, we are a legit business. Like we are a real enterprise doing real things, helping people. And here's this office. It's our flex, that really proves it. So anyway, Chris, any other closing thoughts?
No, that pretty much covers it. It was a great experience. We'd definitely do it over again.
Yeah, man. Cool. Thanks, folks. That's this episode dose. Thanks so much for joining us. We will see you next week on Startup Different. Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, subscribe to and rate Startup Different in your favorite podcast app. If you want to see our radio faces, check us out on YouTube at Startup Different and look us up on social. We're probably there if you are. And lastly, do you want to feature your startup on the show? Reach out via our website, startupdifferent.com. See you next time.